Why are you sitting here by yourself?
I'm just having a drink. What's the issue?
You've been here a while. Looks like you're watching the place.
I'm not watching anything. I own
Let me
this
see
bar.
your ID.
I don't have to show ID without...
Stand up! Now!
Hey, check my pocket. That's my ID. I own this place.
Officer Tyler Vance didn't know it yet, but the moment he stepped into the Obsidian Lounge, he was counting down the final 60 seconds of his career. It was a confrontation that wouldn't just cost him his badge. It would cost the taxpayers $7 million and expose a rot in the precinct that no amount of spin could fix. The neon lights reflecting off expensive bottles of whiskey, the smooth jazz playing in the background, the well-dressed patrons sipping craft cocktails, none of it registered in Vance's mind as legitimate. He saw a black man in a suit standing behind the bar, and his rookie instincts, poisoned by prejudice, told him something was wrong. Before we continue, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and make sure to hit that subscribe button, because this story shows exactly what happens when ego and racism collide with money and power, and the ending will shock you. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 10,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter. Please subscribe to Voiceless Bodycam Files, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. Tyler Vance had graduated from the police academy just 8 months ago, but he carried himself like a veteran. He was 26 years old, athletic, confident to the point of arrogance, and convinced that his badge gave him authority that couldn't be questioned. His academy instructors had flagged him in their evaluations. Shows aggressive tendencies, lacks de-escalation skills, demonstrates bias in scenario training, but the department was short-staffed and desperate. So they pinned a badge on him anyway and sent him out to patrol one of the city's most affluent districts. Vance loved the power. He loved the way people looked at him when he walked into a room. He loved the weight of the gun on his hip and the way his uniform commanded instant respect, or at least compliance. What he didn't love was the politically correct training about implicit bias and community policing. To Vance, that was weakness. Real policing in his mind meant trusting your gut, making quick judgments, and asserting dominance over anyone who challenged your authority. Tonight, Vance was on foot patrol through the upscale entertainment district, a neighborhood of boutique shops, art galleries, and high-end restaurants. It was the kind of place where the median home price was $800,000 and the residents had lawyers on speed dial. Vance hated it. He thought the people here were soft, entitled, and too quick to complain about police tactics. He much preferred the rough neighborhoods where he could be aggressive without consequences. But tonight his captain had assigned him to this district, so here he was, walking past trendy cafes and wine bars looking for anything that seemed out of place. That's when he saw the Obsidian Lounge. The exterior was sleek and modern with black marble accents and gold lettering. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Vance could see well-dressed professionals laughing, drinking, enjoying their Friday night. And behind the bar, moving with practiced ease, was Jeff Anderson, a black man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, his presence commanding and confident. In Vance's mind, something didn't add up. A black man working behind the bar in a place this expensive, in this neighborhood, Vance's instincts, really just his prejudices, told him to investigate. He didn't consider that maybe, just maybe, the man behind the bar belonged there. He didn't consider that success and professionalism came in all colors. He just saw what his bias wanted him to see, a potential problem that needed his intervention. Vance adjusted his belt, checked his reflection in the window, and walked through the door of the Obsidian Lounge. In 60 seconds, his entire life would change, and he would have no one to blame but himself. Tyler Vance's academy file told a story that the department chose to ignore. During his 6 months of training, he had racked up more disciplinary notes than any other cadet in his class. There was the time he used excessive force during a de-escalation drill, leaving his partner with a bruised wrist. There was the incident where he made disparaging comments about a Hispanic community during a cultural sensitivity seminar. There was his final exam scenario, where he drew his weapon on a simulated suspect who was holding a cell phone, not a gun because, in his words, the guy looked suspicious. His academy evaluator, Sergeant Maria Hernandez, had written in her final assessment, Cadet Vance demonstrates a concerning pattern of predatory profiling and an inability to separate personal bias from professional judgment. He views policing as domination rather than service. I strongly recommend additional training in implicit bias and community relations before field assignment. Without intervention, this cadet poses a significant liability risk. The recommendation was filed and promptly ignored. The department was hemorrhaging officers to early retirements and resignations. They needed bodies on the street, and Vance had passed all the technical requirements. His shooting scores were excellent. His physical fitness was top tier. His written exams were adequate. On paper, he met the minimum standards. So they gave him a badge, a gun, and assigned him a field training officer who was too burned out to care. For 6 weeks, Vance rode with Officer Dennis Cole, a 22-year veteran who was counting down to his pension. Cole didn't teach Vance about community policing or constitutional rights. He taught him shortcuts, how to manufacture probable cause, how to pressure suspects into consent searches, how to write reports that justified whatever action you had already taken. The trick, Cole told Vance one night, is to trust your gut. If someone looks wrong, they probably are wrong. Don't overthink it. Don't let the lawyers and the activists make you second-guess yourself. Vance absorbed this wisdom like gospel. By the time his field training ended, he was convinced he had an instinct for spotting criminals. He couldn't articulate what made someone look wrong. It was just a feeling, a vibe, an impression based on clothing, behavior, skin color, and location. In other words, it was textbook profiling. Tonight was his first solo patrol in the upscale district. His captain had given him explicit instructions: keep a low profile. This neighborhood has money and influence. No aggressive stops, no escalations, just presence and visibility. Vance had nodded and said all the right things, but inside he was annoyed. Why should rich people get special treatment? Why should he have to walk on eggshells just because these residents could afford lawyers? If anything, Vance thought, this neighborhood probably needed more aggressive policing. Crime doesn't care about property values. As he walked through the entertainment district, past couples in designer clothes and valets parking luxury cars, Vance felt out of place. These weren't his people. This wasn't his world. And when he saw the Obsidian Lounge, when he saw Jeff Anderson behind that bar, something in his brain clicked. This was his chance to prove he belonged here, that he could find crime even in the fanciest neighborhoods, that his instincts were right. He just needed to assert his authority. Jeff Anderson had spent 10 years building the Obsidian Lounge, and every inch of it represented a battle won. He was 41 years old, a graduate of Howard University with a degree in business management and a minor in hospitality. After college, he had worked his way up through the restaurant industry, starting as a server, then a bartender, then a manager, saving every dollar he could. By 30, he had enough for a down payment on a small property in what was then a struggling neighborhood. The banks had laughed at his business plan. A high-end cocktail lounge in a district known for abandoned storefronts and high crime. They told him he was dreaming, that the market wouldn't support it, that he should try something more realistic for someone with his background. Jeff knew what they meant. They meant someone black shouldn't aim so high. He proved them wrong. He renovated the space himself, working 16-hour days to transform a former warehouse into a sleek, modern bar with exposed brick, custom lighting, and a sound system that made jazz sound like heaven. He hired a mixologist from New York who created a cocktail menu that rivaled anything in the city. He built relationships with local suppliers, artists, and musicians. He created a space that was sophisticated, welcoming, and undeniably successful. Within 3 years, the Obsidian Lounge was featured in the city's top 10 best bars list. Within 5 years, the neighborhood around it had gentrified. with property values doubling. Within 8 years, Jeff had paid off his business loan and was pulling in annual revenues over $1.2 million. He employed 15 people, hosted private events for corporate clients, and had become a respected figure in the local business community. But success didn't shield him from bias. He had been pulled over twice in the past year while driving his Mercedes, both times by officers who seemed surprised when he produced his license and registration without incident. He had been followed in high-end stores by security guards who assumed he couldn't afford to shop there. He had been asked for ID at business networking events where white attendees were waved through. Jeff had learned to navigate these moments with calm professionalism. He never escalated. He never gave anyone an excuse to label him aggressive or difficult. He simply stated facts, presented credentials, and let his accomplishments speak for themselves. But it wore on him, the constant need to prove he belonged in spaces he had literally built. Tonight, the Obsidian Lounge was packed. It was a Friday evening, and the bar was full of young professionals celebrating the end of the work week. Jeff was behind the bar personally, mixing drinks and chatting with regulars. He loved these nights, the energy, the laughter, the sense of community he had created. He had changed out of his usual business casual into a tailored charcoal suit with a slim black tie. It was his signature look, the image he wanted his bar to project: sophisticated, polished, successful. He was pouring a whiskey sour when he noticed the officer walk in. Young guy, early 20s maybe, with the posture of someone trying too hard to look authoritative. Jeff had seen that look before, rookie cops who thought the badge made them kings. The officer was scanning the room, his hand resting on his belt, his eyes suspicious. Jeff's stomach tightened. He had done nothing wrong. His business was legal, his permits current, his staff trained in responsible alcohol service. But he knew how this could go. He had seen it happen to other black business owners, cops showing up, demanding to see paperwork, looking for violations that didn't exist, asserting dominance just because they could. Jeff set down the cocktail shaker and made a decision. He would stay calm. He would be professional. And he would not let this officer intimidate him in his own establishment. The officer's eyes locked on Jeff, and he started walking toward the bar. Vance moved through the crowd with deliberate purpose, his eyes never leaving Jeff. In his mind, this was already a situation that required his intervention. A black man in an expensive suit, working behind the bar in a high-end lounge, in a neighborhood that didn't usually have people like that. To Vance, this screamed identity theft, fraud, or some kind of scam. Maybe this guy had stolen someone's credit cards and was using them to pose as a bartender. Maybe he was dealing drugs through the bar. Maybe he was running some kind of hustle. Vance didn't consider the obvious, that this man might actually work there, might own the place, might belong here. That possibility didn't fit Vance's mental model of the world. He reached the bar and positioned himself directly in front of Jeff, his badge prominently displayed. "I need to see some ID," Vance said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Jeff looked up, his expression neutral but wary. "Is there a problem, officer?" "I asked for ID," Vance repeated, louder this time. A few patrons nearby turned to look. Jeff set down the bottle he was holding and reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Jeff Anderson, age 41, current address in the upscale neighborhood 5 blocks away. Nothing about it suggested criminal activity. Vance stared at the license, then back at Jeff. "What are you doing here?" "I'm working," Jeff said calmly. "Working?" Vance repeated, making it sound like an accusation. "You work here?" "Yes, officer. I'm the bartender tonight." Vance looked around the bar, the expensive bottles, the well-dressed crowd, the polished marble surfaces. This didn't match his image of where a guy like Jeff should be working. "How long you been working here?" "About 10 years, Jeff replied, keeping his voice even. 10 years, Vance said skeptically. He was convinced now that something was off. People don't work as bartenders for 10 years in places like this unless something else is going on. Who's the owner? Jeff took a slow breath. He could see where this was heading, and he knew from experience that revealing he owned the bar would only make things worse. Some people couldn't handle the cognitive dissonance of a successful black entrepreneur. Why are you asking? That was the wrong response. To Vance, questions were challenges. Hesitation was guilt. Because I'm conducting an investigation, Vance said, his voice hardening. And you're going to answer my questions or we're going to have a problem. Several patrons were watching now, the smooth jazz and cocktail chatter giving way to tense silence. Jeff's staff, 2 bartenders and 3 servers, were all looking at their boss, waiting for a signal on how to handle this. Jeff made a decision. He wasn't going to be intimidated, not in his own bar, not by some rookie cop on a power trip. Officer, with all due respect, I haven't done anything wrong. You've seen my ID. I'm legally working here. Unless you have a specific reason for this interrogation, I'd like to get back to serving my customers. Vance's face reddened. The crowd was watching. This guy was making him look weak, questioning his authority in front of witnesses. He needed to reassert control. Step out from behind the bar, now. Jeff didn't move. I'd like to know what I'm being accused of. You're being accused of obstruction if you don't comply, Vance shot back. The tension in the Obsidian Lounge had shifted from curious to concerned. Patrons were pulling out phones, some recording, others texting friends about what was unfolding. Jeff's head bartender, Maria, moved closer, her expression worried. Jeff, should I call someone? Jeff gave her a subtle shake of his head. He didn't want this to escalate, but he also wasn't going to be bullied. Officer, I'm happy to cooperate with legitimate police business, but you haven't given me a legitimate reason for this interaction. What crime do you think I've committed? Vance stepped closer to the bar, invading Jeff's space. You want a reason? How about you look suspicious? How about you're working in a high-end establishment and I have reasonable suspicion you don't belong here? The words hung in the air and several people gasped. Jeff felt the familiar sting of racism, the same feeling he had experienced his entire life, being told, in 1,000 subtle and not-so-subtle ways, that his success was somehow fraudulent, that his presence in spaces of power and wealth was illegitimate. I don't belong here, Jeff repeated, his voice quiet but firm. Officer, I need you to be very clear. What exactly about me suggests I don't belong in my own business? Vance blinked. Your business? Yes, Jeff said, louder now. He had tried to de-escalate, he had tried to avoid this, but this officer wasn't going to stop until Jeff put him in his place. I own this bar. The Obsidian Lounge is my business. I built it from the ground up 10 years ago. I have every permit, every license, every piece of documentation the city requires. And you just walked into my establishment and told me I don't belong here. The bar went silent except for the jazz still playing softly in the background. Vance's brain was trying to process what he had just heard, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. Admitting he was wrong, especially in front of all these witnesses, would make him look like a fool. So instead of apologizing, instead of acknowledging his mistake, Vance doubled down. I don't believe you, Vance said. Jeff stared at him. Excuse me. I said I don't believe you own this place. Show me proof. Jeff couldn't believe what he was hearing. You want to see my business license, my tax returns, my deed to the property? Yeah, actually, I do, Vance said. Because right now, all I see is someone who looks like they wandered into the wrong neighborhood and decided to play dress-up behind a bar. That was it. That was the line. Jeff's staff knew it. The patrons knew it. Even Vance, on some level, probably knew it. But he had said it anyway, his prejudice spilling out in words he couldn't take back. Get out, Jeff said, his voice low and dangerous. What did you say to me? Vance's hand moved to his belt, fingers hovering near his handcuffs. I said get out of my bar, Jeff repeated. You have no legal reason to be here. You're harassing me and my customers. And I'm exercising my right as a property owner to ask you to leave." Vance felt his control slipping. This was supposed to be simple: walk in, check on something suspicious, assert authority, leave. But now this guy was telling him to get out, treating him like he was the problem, and doing it in front of a room full of people with cameras. Vance made the worst decision of his life. "You're under arrest." The moment those words left Vance's mouth, everything changed. Jeff's expression went from angry to calculating. He knew his rights, he knew the law, and he knew that what was about to happen would be recorded from multiple angles by multiple witnesses. "Under arrest for what?" Jeff asked calmly. "Disorderly conduct, obstruction, failure to comply with a lawful order," Vance rattled off, making it up as he went. "Officer, I'm standing behind my own bar, in my own business, having done nothing illegal. You have no probable cause for an arrest." Vance was beyond reason now. His ego had taken over and he couldn't back down. "Put your hands on the bar where I can see them." Jeff looked at his staff, at the patrons, at the phones recording every second of this interaction. He made a choice. He would comply physically but not legally. He placed his hands flat on the polished bar top. "I'm complying under protest. I'm clearly stating that I do not consent to this detention, that I have committed no crime, and that this is an unlawful arrest." Vance moved around the bar, pulling out his handcuffs. "Turn around." Jeff turned slowly, his hands now raised. As Vance approached, Jeff spoke clearly for all the cameras. "My name is Jeff Anderson. I am the owner of the Obsidian Lounge. I have committed no crime. This officer has entered my business, racially profiled me, and is now arresting me without cause." "Shut up," Vance snapped, grabbing Jeff's wrist roughly. The force was unnecessary, aggressive. Jeff winced but didn't resist. Vance wrenched Jeff's arm behind his back too hard, too fast, and Jeff felt something pop in his shoulder. Pain shot through his arm. "You're hurting me," Jeff said through gritted teeth. Vance ignored him, clicking the handcuffs into place so tight they cut into Jeff's wrists. Several patrons were shouting now, telling Vance to stop, saying they were recording everything. Maria, the head bartender, was on the phone with someone, her voice urgent. Vance spun Jeff around to face him, his face inches away. "You think you're smart. You think you can tell me what to do." Jeff looked directly into Vance's eyes, his voice steady despite the pain. "I think you just made the biggest mistake of your career." Vance marched Jeff through the bar, past shocked patrons, past staff members who were calling lawyers and recording everything on their phones. The jazz had stopped playing. The festive atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable silence punctuated by whispers and the clicking of camera shutters. As Vance pushed Jeff toward the door, someone stepped forward, a man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit, his face angry. "Officer, I'm Malcolm Rivers, city councilman for this district. What is the legal basis for this arrest?" Vance barely glanced at him. "Police business, step back." "I'm asking you as an elected official representing this community, what crime has this man committed?" "He's obstructing a police investigation," Vance said, still moving. "What investigation?" Rivers pressed. "I've been in this bar for the past hour. I haven't seen any investigation. I've seen you walk in, harass the owner, and assault him when he asked you to leave." Vance stopped at the door, his grip still tight on Jeff's arm. "If you interfere with this arrest, I'll arrest you too." Rivers pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police chief, and my lawyer, and every news station in this city. You just assaulted a prominent business owner in front of 50 witnesses, and it's all on video." For the first time, Vance felt a flicker of doubt, but he was too far in now. He pushed through the door, dragging Jeff onto the sidewalk. A small crowd had gathered outside, drawn by the commotion. More phones came out. More cameras pointed at Vance. Jeff's shoulder was throbbing and the handcuffs were cutting off circulation to his hands, but his mind was calm, focused. He had been through versions of this before, not this extreme, but similar. He knew the script. Stay calm, don't resist, document everything, lawyer up, make them pay. Vance walked Jeff to his patrol car, pushed him against the hood, and began searching him. The search was rough, invasive, designed to humiliate as much as to find anything illegal. Vance found Jeff's phone, his wallet, his keys. Nothing suspicious, nothing illegal, just the normal contents of a successful businessman's pockets. "Get in," Vance ordered, opening the back door of the patrol car. Jeff complied, awkwardly maneuvering into the back seat with his hands cuffed behind him and his shoulder screaming in pain. Vance slammed the door and got into the driver's seat. As he started the engine, his radio crackled to life. "Unit 742, this is dispatch. We've received multiple calls about an incident at the Obsidian Lounge. Are you on scene?" Vance picked up the radio. 10-4, dispatch. Situation is under control. I have one suspect in custody for disorderly conduct and obstruction. There was a pause, then a different voice came on, deeper, more authoritative. "Unit 742, this is Captain Morrison. What is your location?" Vance's stomach dropped. Why was the captain on the radio? "En route to booking, sir." "Negative. Return to the scene immediately. Do not process the arrest. Do you copy?" Vance looked in the rearview mirror at Jeff, who was staring back at him with an expression that said, "I told you." "Copy that, Captain," Vance said quietly. When Vance pulled back up to the Obsidian Lounge, the scene had transformed. There were now 3 patrol cars parked outside, their lights flashing. Captain Morrison was standing on the sidewalk with City Councilman Rivers and 2 people in suits who looked like lawyers. A news van from Channel 7 was setting up equipment across the street. Vance's hands were shaking as he parked. He had no idea what was happening, but he knew it was bad. He got out and opened the back door, helping Jeff out of the car. Jeff's shoulder was visibly injured now, his movement stiff and painful. Captain Morrison walked over, his face carved from stone. "Uncuff him." "Captain, this man was." "Now, Officer Vance." Vance fumbled with his keys, finally releasing the handcuffs. Jeff's wrists were red and raw where the metal had dug into his skin. He rotated his shoulder carefully, wincing. Morrison turned to Jeff. "Mr. Anderson, I'm Captain Terrence Morrison. I apologize for this incident. Do you need medical attention?" Jeff looked at his shoulder, then at Vance. "Yes, I think he dislocated something when he twisted my arm." Morrison nodded to one of the other officers. "Call an ambulance." Then he turned back to Vance, his voice dropping to a level that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. "My office, tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Do not speak to anyone about this incident. Do not file any reports. Do not even think about leaving the city." Vance's mouth went dry. "Captain, I was just—" "I said do not speak," Morrison cut him off. "You have done enough damage for one night." One of the lawyers stepped forward, handing Jeff a business card. "Mr. Anderson, I'm Patricia Chen with Blackstone and Associates. Councilman Rivers called us. We specialize in civil rights litigation. I'd like to speak with you once you've been medically cleared." Jeff took the card, his eyes never leaving Vance's face. The rookie officer looked pale now, the arrogance drained away, replaced by the dawning realization that he had made a catastrophic mistake. The ambulance arrived. As paramedics examined Jeff's shoulder, confirming it was indeed partially dislocated, the Channel 7 reporter approached with a microphone. "Mr. Anderson, can you tell us what happened here tonight?" Jeff looked at the camera, at the reporter, at the crowd of patrons who had followed him outside. He thought about all the times he had swallowed his anger, all the times he had stayed silent to avoid being labeled difficult, all the times he had made himself smaller to make others comfortable. "Not tonight. I was assaulted in my own business by a police officer who decided I didn't belong there," Jeff said, his voice clear and strong despite the pain. "I was handcuffed, injured, and humiliated in front of my customers and staff. and it was all caught on camera. This isn't just about me. This is about every person of color who has been told they don't belong in spaces they built, who has been profiled for the crime of being successful while black. This ends now." The reporter turned to Vance. "Officer, do you have any comment?" Vance looked at Morrison, who gave him a single, sharp headshake. Vance got in his patrol car without a word and drove away, his career already over, and he didn't even know it yet. The lawsuit was filed within 48 hours. Patricia Chen didn't waste time. The complaint alleged excessive force, false arrest, racial profiling, violation of civil rights under Section 1983, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The damages sought, $7 million. The number made headlines. $7 million for a single wrongful arrest. But as the discovery process began, as Chen's team dug into Vance's background and the department's hearing practices, the number started to seem reasonable, even conservative. Vance's academy records became public. The warnings from his evaluators, the incidents of excessive force, the documented pattern of bias, all of it came out. Chen deposed Sergeant Hernandez, who testified that she had explicitly recommended Vance not be put on the street without additional training. The department had ignored her. Then came the Bodycam footage. Vance's camera had been running the entire time, capturing every word, every escalation, every moment of bias. The footage was devastating. It showed Vance entering the bar without cause, profiling Jeff based on appearance, manufacturing reasons to detain him, and using excessive force during the arrest. There was no ambiguity, no room for interpretation. It was, in legal terms, a slam-dunk case. But Chen didn't stop there. She subpoenaed Vance's entire arrest record from his 8 months on the force. What she found was damning: 23 arrests, 18 of them involving people of color, 12 of those arrests ultimately dismissed for lack of probable cause. Vance had been profiling suspects based on race, making unlawful stops, and manufacturing probable cause to justify his actions. The Jeff Anderson case wasn't an aberration, it was a pattern. The city's legal team tried to fight it at first. They filed motions to dismiss, argued that Vance had acted within the scope of his duties, claimed qualified immunity, but every motion was denied. The video evidence was too clear. The pattern of misconduct was too established. The public outcry was too loud. 3 months into the lawsuit, the city council offered a settlement. They wanted this to go away before it went to trial, before a jury could award even more money, before the national media picked up the story and made their city a symbol of police racism. Chen brought the offer to Jeff, $7 million paid by the city's insurance. Vance would be fired, barred from law enforcement in the state. The department would implement mandatory bias training and revise their hearing practices. It was everything they had asked for. Jeff sat in Chen's office, looking at the settlement agreement. $7 million, more money than he had ever imagined having. Enough to retire, to expand his business empire, to never worry about money again. "What do you want to do?" Chen asked. Jeff thought about the night he was arrested. He thought about the humiliation, the pain, the fear. But he also thought about all the other people who had been profiled, arrested, and mistreated by officers like Vance, people who didn't have the resources to fight back, who didn't have lawyers and politicians making phone calls on their behalf. "I'll take it," Jeff said, "but I'm not keeping the money." The settlement was announced at a press conference 6 months after the incident. Jeff stood at a podium in front of the Obsidian Lounge, his shoulder fully healed, flanked by Patricia Chen and Councilman Rivers. Camera crews from every major news outlet in the city were present. "Today, we're announcing the resolution of my lawsuit against the city," Jeff began. "The city has agreed to pay $7 million in damages and to implement significant reforms to their police hearing and training practices. Officer Tyler Vance has been terminated and barred from law enforcement. This is accountability." He paused, looking at the cameras. But accountability isn't enough. Change requires action. That's why I'm announcing the creation of the Obsidian Justice Fund. The entire $7 million settlement will go into this fund, which will provide free legal representation for victims of police profiling and misconduct who can't afford lawyers. No one should have to face what I faced without the resources to fight back. The announcement stunned the reporters. $7 million given away to help others. It was unprecedented. This isn't about revenge, Jeff continued. This is about making sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else, and if it does, they'll have the support they need to hold their oppressors accountable. At the back of the crowd, Tyler Vance watched on his phone from his apartment. He had been fired 3 days after the incident, his law enforcement career over before it had really begun. The state had revoked his police certification. He was facing a separate Department of Justice investigation into civil rights violations. His name had become synonymous with racist policing in the city. Watching Jeff announce the creation of the legal fund, Vance felt something he hadn't felt in months: shame. Not because he had been caught, not because he had lost his job, but because he was finally seeing Jeff Anderson as a human being rather than a profile. He was seeing the man he had assaulted as someone who had taken his pain and transformed it into protection for others. Vance would spend the next decade working construction, carrying the weight of his mistake, forever barred from the career he thought he wanted. Jeff would spend those same years expanding his business empire, opening 2 more bars, and using his platform to advocate for police reform. The Obsidian Justice Fund would go on to provide legal representation for over 200 victims of police misconduct in its first 5 years, winning millions more in settlements and forcing systemic changes in how the department operated. Every time someone walked into Jeff's bar, they saw a plaque on the wall. From pain comes purpose. From injustice comes justice. No one is above the law, and no one is beneath its protection. Tyler Vance had walked into the Obsidian Lounge looking for trouble. What he found instead was a man who refused to be broken, a community that refused to stay silent, and a justice system that, for once, actually worked. His 60-second confrontation had cost the city $7 million, cost him his career, and created a legacy of protection for countless victims. The cameras had seen everything, and this time there were consequences.